Just 3 weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump announced he would ban the popular application TikTok, the app's Chinese parent company is fighting back. ByteDance issued a statement over the weekend saying it will sue the U.S. government to protect its rights and interests. At the same time, a group of U.S.-based users of another popular Chinese application, WeChat, are also taking legal action to prevent the Trump administration from banning the app on the grounds of violation of freedom of speech. How significant are these cases for the companies and users involved, and what precedent does it set for Chinese tech companies that are striving to succeed overseas? Joining me today from Washington, D.C. is James Early, CEO of the consulting firm Stansberry China, and in Beijing, Einar Tangen, former U.S. prosecutor and lawyer. So, gentlemen, welcome to The Point. Let's first take a look at the legal action expected from ByteDance. Now, since the executive orders were issued by President Trump on August the 7th, the company has been relatively quiet. They issued a statement saying that the executive order by Donald Trump was not in accordance with any law. It's also reported that TikTok spent over a year trying to communicate with the U.S. government, apparently not very successful. And about the case per se, it's estimated if the ban on TikTok is finalized, it could cost thousands of jobs in the United States. So, James, how should we take this recent ByteDance lawsuit against the U.S. government? What prompted the company to make such a decision instead of just selling TikTok? And what could be the legal basis?
Well, first, and let me disclose I have a bias in this case. I have a preteen son who spends hours a day on TikTok, so perhaps for that reason alone, I wouldn't mind seeing this app disappear. But more seriously, look, if anything, they may see themselves as having a fiduciary duty to their investors to challenge this or to sort of promote the company through every means they can. In the U.S., a lawsuit challenging an executive order is a long shot, but it is possible. They have been overturned in the past. Trump had one successfully overturned by prosecutors a couple of years ago related to federal workers. So there is some chance of success, and I think they're just going for it.
But what do you think is the rationale behind their decision to take this long shot, James?
Well, they're saying it's unconstitutional, that Trump didn't follow due process. I mean, certainly people familiar with Trump's actions know he can be a bit whimsical. So there's probably some strength to that, especially when Trump mentions the idea of the U.S. taking some middleman fee, which frankly sounds ridiculous and may undermine an otherwise legitimate cause in many other people's minds. But there's a counter-argument here. There is a strong bipartisan push towards protecting Americans' data from, let's say, parties with malign interests in the eyes of the government, and this 2017 law in China stating that any Chinese company has to share data with the Chinese government if requested to is pretty powerful, and I think that's going to weigh pretty heavily, at least in the U.S. court of public opinion, and maybe in the court as well.
I know. What do you think? What do you think is the reasons behind ByteDance's decision not take the easy road by just selling TikTok, but rather to take, the tougher road of fighting it in court, which might take much longer?
You see, that's the difference between American and Chinese. Actually, the legal route is the easier route in the United States. Quite frankly, they will probably, I'd say they have a 90% chance of getting an injunction and putting this on hold. This is obviously a due process case, in all deference to James. The legal issues here are very clear because Trump did his second action. Remember, he first gave them 45 days and then he extended to 90 with the stipulation that it be sold in the United States. That doesn't sound like it has anything to do with national security. And there are issues of fact. ByteDance says that they have no servers in China to which information is being sent, and that they wouldn't give it over. So this is a question of fact. Remember, this is a corporation that is run by an American. It is listed on an American bourse. So this is kind of going to sound very hollow. This is another defeat in the making. But it doesn't matter to Donald Trump. This is purely distraction politics. He's trying to make sure that people are paying attention to anything except the incompetency of his handling of COVID-19 and the financial aftermath, and of course trying to get reelected.
James, what is your reaction to Einar's assessment that maybe the legal fight is the shorter one?
Oh yeah, that's definitely true. In the U.S., I mean, I guess unlike in China, it's nobody could imagine a court overturning something Xi Jinping says, right? Or nobody could imagine someone even challenging
but
Xi
Xi
Jinping in
Jinping
court.
would not go,
But in the U.S.,
but President Xi, the Chinese leadership, wouldn't go just do whatever according to anybody's personal will or personal opinion, which is pretty much the case here, because what President Trump, and it's not just the TikTok case, right? We have seen all along, basically, what he couldn't get it through the Congress, he just signs it into executive order, and that's why people have to fight it. James.
Well, I mean, I don't know about the Xi statement. So many things we don't know about Chinese politics. But I mean, the point is, it is a viable path. Einar is absolutely right. In the U.S., it is a very viable path to pursue that, and I think that's a good thing. I do agree with Einar on some things, on the facts, on the merits. If Trump's pure interest was protecting the data security of Americans, WeChat, even though it's much smaller in use here, is a much juicier target, because there is evidence that data does go to China if Americans are chatting back and forth. Those words might not be censored, but they're factored into certain Chinese censorship algorithms in China. In other words, there is evidence of data sharing, and it's a lot more robust data sharing, albeit for a smaller part of the population. But he went after TikTok first, which is, I agree that it's not as clearly a bad actor, if you're trying to find a villain. WeChat makes the juicier target.
I know.
Well, quite frankly, I mean, you don't have any proof. Generally, in a place where you say the rule of law matters, and you were saying that applies to China, and that is one of the frequent criticisms of China, that it doesn't apply here in China. So in this particular case, you're not allowing. You're saying that something could happen. We have no evidence that it actually has happened, but because we're afraid that it could happen, we're going to take action. That's like me saying to you, James, well, you don't like your mother-in-law. You could kill her. Therefore, I need to put you in jail. This is not the way it works. That's why we have courts and laws and things like that, and it's not a consensus of the mob determining who should be allowed due process and who shouldn't. It's a fundamental part of our Constitution. I'm surprised that you pushed that. In terms of WeChat, I mean, this is the original gang that won't shoot straight. I mean, Trump is going after WeChat. WeChat gets 1% of its revenues in the United States, all right? However, in China, if WeChat is taken away, and let's say, for instance, just one instance here, Apple is not able to put it in its chat app cell, they will be in a situation where 95% of Chinese would rather give up their Apple phone than they would their WeChat. So
okay.
At that point, they stand to lose 25% of their business.
Clearly, either President Trump didn't do the calculation, or he didn't really care whether Apple is going to sustain any loss on that. But since James was given that very difficult question, James, I think you have the right to respond. What would you say to Einar's point about, you could be doing something, so you have to be put into jail so that you don't do something?
Sorry, so Nadia was a little bit tight on that point, but look, I support due process. I mean, it's a clear right, and no company should have their justice hijacked by the whims of somebody or by mob rule. I mean, the U.S. may criticize other countries for doing that, so they certainly shouldn't do it themselves here. With respect to WeChat, though, I mean, I guess there are a few arguments here, but we have a lot of people here. I've seen them personally complain about, the impact. I mean, impact on American businesses is one thing. The impact on the Chinese diaspora here, and there are millions, 3 to 5 million, I'm forgetting the number, Chinese living in the U.S. If we look at the effect WeChat has on them compared to, or the effect a U.S. ban of WeChat would have on their ability to do business or communicate with their friends and family compared to, let's say, what the Chinese government has done as far as internet restrictions, I mean, it's not even close. So, it's in terms of a moral leg to stand on. I think it's, maybe they have an argument to be made by holding the U.S. to its own standards, but I think if you compare both sides, it's not really, it's not equal at all. And you have not just the U.S., you have now Australia, you have India, other companies pushing on TikTok, and just watch. I mean, Europe, UK, Canada, I'm predicting, whether it's right or wrong, whether we like it or not, I'm predicting over the next 6 months that we're going to have similar actions taken frankly, across the world against a lot of these Chinese apps. I mean, these are just the beginning. Again, right or wrong, like it or not, I think that's going to be the trend.
I think it has to be pointed out the reason why India banned TikTok was not because of any national security concern, but it was banning a whole host of Chinese applications because of the border issue between China and India that was at a high point at the moment of the action of the Indian government. So that's different.
Fair.
And then with the Australian government, with each different government, we actually talked about it in a different program. The concerns were different, and you can't really say it's all because of similar concerns of national security or privacy issues that these countries are all considering taking uniform action against TikTok. And some of these countries are also doing this, you know, under pressure or to, how do you say, to curry favor with the United States. Einar,
there needs to be a point where people start looking past Donald Trump, and I think it's quite clear why. We've seen the Democratic National Convention. It went off very well without a hitch. We're about to approach the Republican convention. Yes, we know the outcome. Donald Trump will be nominated, but it's not looking like he's going to be elected. At this point, I think a lot of things will change once that happens, and a lot of it will have to do with issues like this.
But that aside, I think James raised a probably apparently legitimate question that a lot of people will have on their mind. How do you compare the case of WeChat being banned in the United States and the inaccessibility of some of the Western or international social media platforms in China?
Okay. Personally, I prefer everything be open. But for China's perspective, there were laws on the books, and it was a question that these companies said that they would not obey those particular laws. They were in regard to security. There's been a move towards a sovereign intranet in China since 2013, and you're seeing that not only in China now, but around the world. So this is not something new, and in fact, everything that we're discussing here is along the same lines. So maybe she anticipated. The issue for China was it did not want a fifth column of very negative, constant barrage of news, negative news about China, going directly to its people in an attempt to, in essence, destabilize the government. You've already heard Pompeo make it very clear that he and many others like him feel that China needs a regime change, that it cannot possibly go on the way it is. I think China saw itself as protecting itself.
And we never hear anybody talking about wanting, from Chinese side, wanting a regime change in the United States, right, James? You have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, by the same token, I've been on this show many, many times over the years. I don't think we've ever done a structurally positive topic about the U.S. For that matter. But yeah, I mean, you don't see the same thing. I mean, but you do see a lot of complaining about Trump.
We complain about policies. We complain about policies, and we never said.
Oh, I complain about Trump.
We never said that the United States has to have a regime change, has to have a total revolution or different political system in order to be recognized by the international community.
Yeah, I get your point.
Yeah.
I get your point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, time is up. If you don't have anything burning to add, let's leave it here. But it's been a good discussion, James. I appreciated your participation, and Einar as well. Many thanks to our two guests.